You're listening to Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Join us as we explore how medical professionals can achieve stellar success in all areas of life. It's time to level up.
Hi, everyone. We're back at Stellar Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tudor Francu, and I have a great, impressive guest today, Dr. Preeya Genz from Dallas, Texas. How are you, Dr. Genz?
I'm doing great. Thanks.
I want to start with a very simple question, and I think it's included in the name of the podcast. How do you see success for yourself, and what is your approach to do what you do?
Great question. For me, success for myself is being able to really live authentically in what I do personally and professionally, to have the freedom to choose and to change and to grow and adapt in a field that I feel like is often a little bit more static than we'd like it to be. I think the medical and dental world, I'm in the dental world, it's hard to overcome the inertia, right? We do what works because it works, and to make a change is scary and it's taking risks. And for me, with success, I think having the courage to take those risks and the confidence and the experience to know and feel like when I make a decision, it's because it resonates with kind of my vision for where I see my life, my practice, my patients, is what I consider the measure of success for me. It's balance, or that dynamic equilibrium that we seek.
Interesting. We're going to talk more about your vision that you mentioned. But let's tell the audience a little bit about your journey. How did you start? What was your journey so far, and where are you now?
Okay. So I live in Dallas, Texas now, but I actually grew up in Edmonton, Canada. So very different place, and moved down to Texas when I was 15, not willingly, with my parents. And I've tried to leave ever since, multiple times. So grew up in an Indian household, or Indian, Canadian, very, we didn't really go to the doctor unless there was a really compelling reason to go. Had a beautiful garden, just really learned kind of the food is medicine kind of ideals, and just lived a very simple lifestyle. Grew up outside, even in the cold. And moving to Texas was a huge culture shift for me. Just very, just a different lifestyle. And I didn't love it, of course, as a teenager, who does? But I did know I wanted to be a dentist. I wanted to be a dentist from about 8th grade onward. And a lot of it was being able to fuse the artistry with the science and the care. And so that I knew from a young age was what I wanted to do, more than just write a prescription and send people away, which is how I felt medicine was even at that time. And so went to college in New Orleans, went to Tulane and loved it, did a neuroscience major with a focus on pre-dental, and then got into dental school here in Texas. And in between, I worked at Starbucks for a bit, learned the excellence of community customer service, and how to make some pretty decent coffee. And I think the big thing, so when I graduated from dental school, I left Texas immediately, moved out to the East Coast with my husband, and worked for a DSO, so a big dental chain. And I lasted maybe 6 months. I hated it. I saw like 30 or 40 patients my first day, doing the hygiene, doing all the things, was replacing a dentist who would do a root canal on really anything that had patent roots that he could take care of. Didn't matter that there was no problem with the tooth. And it was just not a good fit. So we moved from East Coast to West Coast about a year after we'd moved to the East Coast. And I found this amazing boutique practice that served lattes and fresh baked chocolate cookies and just took care of their patients. And I was introduced there to a place called the Coyce Center in Seattle, headed by John Coyce. And I started taking classes at the center. I was the youngest kid in the class, just right out of school. But my peers were people who'd been practicing for years. And in dentistry, there are a lot of larger teaching institutions that all kind of have their own philosophy about patient care and about how to manage occlusion, how to manage the bite. That seems to be the dividing line for a lot of dentists, even though there's a lot of similarities. But where John really separated himself was really shifting paradigms, looking at the teeth as part of the mouth, part of the body, part of the human, and looking at risk as not just the individual tooth, but like what is actually happening with the lifestyle of the patient, what's happening that's creating risk, and not being afraid to change something we've done forever when we find a better option. And so he really has shaped my career as a whole at looking at that person as a whole person. I worked at a few different practices in the Washington State area where I was, and we moved back down to Texas when I had she was 2 at the time that we moved, our 2-year-old daughter, and we realized we needed some grandparent support and some more sunshine and maybe some margaritas as well, because those are all really hard to get up in Washington to the level that we have here in Texas. And I worked for a couple different practices, almost partnered with a colleague, and it's different how people do dentistry on the West Coast versus the East versus the South. There's just some, again, shifts in mindset and stuff. And I realized after doing all my training with Hoist, like I was kind of broken. Like nobody did it the same way here. And so I realized I had to open my own practice. And so I bought a practice from a doctor who was on her way to retirement, used it as kind of a scaffolding for this practice as it is today, changed the name to The Whole Tooth, and didn't realize that I would be where I am today when I bought the practice back in 2018. When I thought whole tooth, I thought more about just the whole person. I love the play on words. Now what I do is much more holistic, not just in considering the whole person, but looking at the mind, body, and spirit, and doing cleaner dentistry and really kind of honing in on what a patient truly needs as an individual, not just as a collective. And it's been really great, especially this year. We've done a lot of deep diving and soul searching, trying to figure out, why are we different? How are we different? How can we, again, shift that paradigm to deliver a level of care that is very different from what we consider traditional dentistry or conventional dentistry, and move the needle. Because really the goal for me is like, don't just check the box. You don't come to the dentist just to get your teeth cleaned. I mean, that's what a lot of people believe. But the reality is the mouth is the portal to the rest of the body. If we're cleaning your teeth, what matters is how we're impacting your health. How are we changing your ecosystem? How are we changing your body? And so that's something I'm very passionate about. And I've learned so much and continue to learn more and continue to just refine and define our processes. And so that's where I am now.
Yeah, that's so impressive. And I think I want to dissect a little bit those into small little parts. First of all, it's amazing how dentistry evolved over the years. And I think this whole holistic or biological, however you want to call it, approach in dentistry, it's so important. And it's probably one of the specialties that developed much more than we think. In terms of materials, procedures, the way you look at, like you said, the way you look at a specialty itself and not just treat one tooth at a time, but treat the body and the whole oral cavity or habits and routines of that patient that led to that issue. But also, I want to emphasize the fact that there are very few dentists in the United States right now that are thinking that way. Like you said, the trend was for most of the national or big corporations to take over the dental practices or, private equity firms or whatever. And the bottom line was the most important thing. But you experienced something that I want to kind of emphasize, and maybe you can tell us more about this. How did you evolve from a dental school graduate who worked in several places like that to embody someone who thinks differently, goes outside of the comfort zone, builds her own practice, and does something different in a state that it's the most conservative state in the nation, I would say, and be very successful with that?
Great question. I definitely feel like I'm someone who's always colored outside the lines. I think one of the biggest things throughout my practice years was, for whichever doctor or corporation I worked for, it was like, you're too slow. You talk too much. You listen too much. Like, just get the job done and produce. And so from early on, I think the pathway had sort of been laid for me that, I'm great with my hands. I'm a great clinician. One of my dental school instructors, and it stuck with me, said that I had great diagnostic acumen. And I thought, well, that's pretty awesome. Because I don't think everybody does. I think some people struggle with that part, and they just want to be the mechanics, and they just want to do their job and leave. I want to understand. I want to know more. I've always been very curious and loved puzzles and puzzling and just trying to connect the dots, whether it's people to people or understanding, how did we get here? And so I think each step along the path kind of served a purpose in terms of learning the art of customer service, for example. So working at Starbucks, working at that boutique practice, that was a big deal because that was really important to me to learn, how do you serve a person and a patient and make them feel special? How do you scale that if you need to? I think I learned a lot in these corporate practices, both good and bad. There's certain things that you have to learn, right? You have to know how to run a business to some capacity or be profitable. You have to charge your value. Otherwise, you can't keep your doors open. So I learned real quickly how much I really don't love insurance, and was really excited when I purchased this practice. It was an out-of-network practice, and we've moved to a fee-for-service model because there's no other way to really deliver the level of care that we deserve to provide our patients, or that they deserve to receive. And that changes the profitability for sure.
Yeah, especially, as a medical or dental graduate, we have no idea of any business skills. Nobody teach that in the school at all. So how did you learn those skills?
A variety of ways. Definitely lots of observation within different practices. One of the DSOs that I worked for when I first moved back to Dallas it was like the best of the worst at the time. And they spent a lot of time, I think once a month, we would meet with the administrative team and we'd go over metrics. And so I got a good sense of like, okay, what is overhead? What is cost? How do we manage that? And what happens if we don't? What's the benefit of adjunctive aids in recommending products, which I don't do for the profitability purpose. I think it's really to allow better success, but like it has a role in how we kind of diversify what we're providing. I had this really great opportunity 2-3 years ago now with Glidewell, which is one of the biggest dental labs, one of the most great success stories in just a small, tiny lab that grew into this amazing corporation. I was part of a leadership program for women that the CEO created because she wasn't seeing enough women in the dental space, enough women talking, showing leadership, any of that. And so through about 7 months, I think, plus another 3 months of executive coaching, we received all kinds of education on business, financial, speaking, social media, mindset, and then the coaching paired with it. And I think that really helped me up level to where I am now. I've worked with a couple coaches over the years, and I think that is huge in terms of allowing us to level up and have someone who's more neutral that's able to hold us accountable to teach a lot of times, depending on the coach that you work with, and to really give an honest perspective on where you are and where you want to go. And so I learned a lot through that, especially looking at what metrics really matter. With the DSO that I worked with, a lot of things that they cared about, I don't care as much about. I really believe that if you do right by the patient, you charge what is fair. And that's not just, for me, that's not an a la carte fee. We're talking experience. We're talking time. Time is huge. The time that was spent to learn the skill, the time to perfect it, and the time that you're now spending with the patient. I think doing those things allows for that profitability to happen much more easily. But you do have to really periodically eevaluate and look at what the different costs are that are going into what you're producing, and does it make sense?
There is a apparent disconnect here between a normal, regular dental practice that I see, the typical corporate model, where profitability is the main drive, I would say. And what you are doing, the holistic type, where it's more patient care focus and secondarily a, profit out of that. How do you combine those two ideas? Because it seems that they're disconnected.
I think it depends how you look at it, right? It's just like when you talk about sales, we're all selling all the time. But if you're selling something you believe in, and if you're selling something that you believe will benefit someone else, it's not a bad thing because you're really providing a service. And so I think the same goes with profit. I believe that money is fluid and you have to give it to get it, and it helps make the world go round. So if you can provide a service that's benefiting somebody and they receive it and they pay for it, and it helps complete that circle, then I think you get the outcome you want for the patient, and we get the outcome that we need to be able to provide for our families as well. And so when you think about it, not as, you do a procedure and say the practice down the street charges $100 and I charge $300. Well, number one, my profit margin's probably not what you think it is, because we use different supplies, materials, resources, and stuff that's less tangible that goes into how we got to that number. But the value and why we charge more isn't just because I want to make more money. It's because there's a whole energetic, physical, mental product that we're providing the patient to make their lives better. And that's the value there. And so
I think the holistic approach is it's definitely something new for a lot of people. And I'd like you to develop a little bit more of a definition of what the holistic dentistry means for a patient. But the notion that we have to work with the cheapest materials to accomplish the same result, it's most of the time detrimental for the patient, because obviously you put some things in their mouth that are, 20 years later, they prove to be toxic or, producing all kinds of other issues. Like I'm thinking, 20, 30 years ago, dentistry was based on mercury and all kinds of products that now nobody would use. So what is holistic dentistry?
That's a great question. So holistic dentistry and biological dentistry, or at least how I've been taught, are a little bit different. So holistic dentistry is kind of the parent top of the tree, or pyramid, whatever, top category. So holistic is referring to that whole person component and really looking at how it all fits together. within that, biological or functional or integrative dentistry, to me, they're kind of synonymous with one another. Now we're diving into some of the metrics and really more of the science behind it as well. So we're integrating the why, attaching mind, body, soul to what's going on in the mouth to get a better sense of what's causing the issues with C, viewing everything in the mouth as symptoms of something greater, and then adding things like salivary testing or looking beneath the microscope. So to me, holistic dentistry or biological dentistry is taking dentistry and diving deeper, going beyond to really understand not just that something is breaking down, but why is it breaking down? And respecting that sometimes it has nothing to do with the mouth itself, but the rest of the body, the system, how we're breathing, how we're sleeping, how we manage our stress or don't manage our stress. And to me, a biological dentist is someone who's going to be very curious and open-minded and always looking for different ways to help connect those dots. I think the more I see, the more I learn and want to know and realize the less I know, because these patients are coming with these random ailments and you're going, well, they don't understand. Or we do something and the way they heal is different from anticipated. And in traditional dentistry, we dismiss that as crazy, right? It's just like, well, they're pain in the you know what. And obviously their pain tolerance isn't what it should be and they're fine. Where here we're peeling back layers and trying to understand, is it something that's incompatibility? Is it something with just how everything fits together? Could it be something within the cranium itself? And I think really being more humble and acknowledging that we don't always have the level of control that we think we do when we start messing with the body. So did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting definition. And the fact that it's pretty much a brand new specialty, I would say, or a different approach to the traditional aspect of dentistry means that a lot of people like yourself thought about, like you said, that the teeth being an organ of our body. It's not just a piece of bone that you treat. This means that you guys, and you especially yourself, have a different approach in terms of your mindset, and think about your patients as a whole. Means that you think about your success and your practice as a whole, at a different level. To get there means that there's an evolution in your thinking. And I want to know what made you go that route. Was there any event in your past or your medical professional career that didn't go your way and you learned from it and you moved on? Was there anything that you can specifically say, this thing made me change my mind?
I don't know that I had a specific thing that changed my mind as much as a lot of different inputs that kind of led to this transition to where I am. One of the big ones, I think, was learning about the airway in sleep. And my now 12-year-old daughter was born missing her lateral incisors, her primary and her adult lateral incisors. And this was at a time where the airway conversations, so about 10 years ago, were really just starting to happen. And I had learned at a course, I was at a course and we were talking with one of the mentors and learned about, if you don't have those teeth right from the bat, you're not going to have the structure that you need. Thumb sucker, guess what? So was I, so was my mom. Different habitual things with, challenges to nurse, powered through. It was fine. But turns out she's got a tongue tie and it's pretty significant. How well was she sleeping? She had night terrors as a little one, late to potty train at nighttime, things that we just dismiss as like, well, it's just normal, but it's really common, not normal. And so when I started learning more about that, because I knew I'd have to treat her at some point in time, we're going to have to do something. So let's figure this out because I feel like there's probably a better way than what I know right now. And so the journey to trying to figure out what I was going to do for her when we got to where we are now is a lot of what has driven me to ask questions, pursue more knowledge, and learn as I'm doing that about different components of the body that I wasn't aware existed. For example, the bones of the skull and this cranial rhythm that naturally exists is not something that we were taught about in dental school. But man, it makes a difference if there's birth trauma, if there's an extended labor, anything like that, and things shift. Well, it impacts growth and development and posture and everything else. And so, before you're out of the womb, there's all these changes happening. And so I think that was a big piece of what started to shift my thought process. And when, as you said, anytime something happens that's more personal to you, it becomes more of a mission to figure out how to change what's happening. I think the other thing is really just my experiences in practice. This, like, you're not fast enough, you're talking too much, you're doing these things. I knew I was a good clinician. I knew I could be a great dentist and that there was a market for me, that people were looking, because I always attracted those people. And that's why it took so long, because they wanted to know, like, well, why is this happening to me? I brush, I floss, I use mouthwash, and I'm still getting cavities. Like, I don't understand. And so I think my need to heal and to help and to understand, and realizing that the answers that I sought were not in my toolbox, were what really brought me to, okay, well, let's figure this out. Like, there must be other ways. And so I did start to learn more about issues with mercury toxicity. I think you get to about 30, especially in womanhood, and then 40, and you're like, man, stuff is breaking down. I've got brain fog, all of that stuff. And we just dismiss it as age and motherhood and just being in that phase. And I refuse to accept that there's not a way to change something. I don't like that answer, that, like, you're stuck with this. It's never, to me, acceptable. And so when someone says that, it's like, well, are you sure? I feel like there's got to be something else. And so I think that is kind of the mindset with which I approach most of these things, where I'm like, this is something we can overcome. We can figure out a better way to do this. And if we can't, then, well, I'm not done yet.
Yeah. Well, recently, with all this biohacking and new approach to health in general, by so many people, holistic dentistry is probably one of the things that we need to learn about more, definitely. And I know there are a lot of toxic materials in dentistry that can affect the body outside of your oral cavity. What do you think about fluoride?
I'm not a fan. I think that's one of the last things when you're kind of converting that mindset, that the last things to go, because we've always been taught, it's the panacea. It's going to fix everything. Look at this. I believe it's a neurotoxin. There's plenty of data as recently came out to show that there are impacts on IQ levels. And there's also data to show in countries that are not the US, where fluoridation hasn't been a big thing, that the rate of decay or caries has kind of ebbed and flowed in a similar pattern. So to say that fluoridated water is what's caused the reduction in caries or decay, to me, doesn't hold water, especially knowing that the reason for decay is typically an imbalance in the gut and in the oral cavity. So if it's an inside-out issue, and we've got reflux, we've got mouth breathing, we have gut issues, well, we need to fix that. If it's an outside-in issue and it's a habitual thing where our hygiene's not right, or we're drinking things that cause decay because they create acid and they bathe the teeth in the acid, and we have bugs in the microbiome that aren't right from that perspective, well, then we need to address that. When we're talking about health and trying to take care of people and reduce the rates of decay, a lot of the people that we're trying to take care of for cheaper, they're not drinking water. So why are we, like, that's not the measure that we're looking for. for people who are drinking water, I think we need to give them a choice, and that's a whole other thing. But, we should be able to choose what goes into and comes out of our bodies as much as we're able to, that's reasonable. And also the fact that the fluoride that goes into the water system is coming from industrial waste byproducts from fertilizer. And it was a cheap way for fertilizer companies to get rid of it. And I mean,
yes.
You know what?
Yeah, I'm of the same opinion. And, moreover, I think toothpaste is another subject that we need to go into because, we're taught so many years since childhood that you need to brush your teeth with your toothpaste. And, the commercial companies out there coming out with all kinds of marketing tricks about toothpaste and whitening and all this stuff, fluoride in it. But they put a label on the back of the toothpaste box saying that it's toxic for the body. Don't swallow this. I'm thinking, is there any other better alternative? Is this the best we can do in terms of how we brush your teeth? What do you think about this?
I agree. I think, and this is where it's interesting, and I struggle. I think that the products that we use matter to a degree. I think adding toxicity into the mix is certainly not beneficial. When I look at a toothpaste, I'm looking for something that has minimal abrasiveness, minimal extra junk added, including fluoride, no fluoride, in fact. We want something that's not acidic. There are a lot of toothpastes on the market that are pretty acidic and they're very abrasive, which creates breakdown instead of supporting the health of the tooth. So when we're talking toothpaste, I think there are a lot of better options on the market that are fluoride free. They add in pre or probiotics, ideally both, that help to create the right ecosystem to support and protect your teeth. There's some still controversial pieces. Xylitol in some camps, it's a big no. Some feel like it's an important part because it helps reduce the caries risk. I think, and the same thing with hydroxyapatite, whether it needs to be in there at all, if it should be micro, it should be nano, what's the shape, what's the size. To me, I think at this moment, and this is where I reserve the right to change my mind the more I learn, but I think having hydroxyapatite in the toothpaste is important and effective. And I've seen it in my own household where we removed fluoride as much as possible 5 years ago, filter it all out, fluoride-free toothpaste with hydroxyapatite. And I've seen my sugar bug husband's teeth remineralize and stay stable despite his best efforts. So I think it helps. But I think there's something out there for everyone. I mean, there's some amazing tooth powders. Dr. Michelle has one that is free of all of those additives. I think what we're doing is just supporting, though. At the end of the day, if you have the wrong enzymes, you have some sort of issue, bacterial, pH, gut, microbiome, whatever you do isn't going to help. So what we're trying to do is enhance and promote the right shift in the ecosystem, but we're not curing anything. And a lot of patients do come in and they're like, well, what toothpaste should I use? What floss should I use? Let's talk more about how do we change this ecosystem and use your toothpaste and floss to support that. For someone who's healthy, you don't really need a lot of stuff in there. I mean, you could brush with baking soda and I think it would be okay. But for someone who has other issues, okay, what can we do? And, herbally, there's so many options now too. So it's a rabbit hole. I think you really need to trust the source and know that it's maybe not a home kitchen. I think American made is good. German, Japanese made products are fantastic because their standards are so much higher than ours. A lot of the European products, like I wish we could get here. Patients coming in with some of it. I'm like, where did you get that from? I can't find it. But yeah, I think that especially moving forward, I think we're going to see some significant shifts in just the toothpaste market as well. Hopefully for the better.
Yes, absolutely. I think something needs to change in that respect also. I want to kind of take a sidestep here and look at the holistic approach, I would say, for yourself, for you as a medical practitioner. What is your day look like? How do you approach everything in a holistic manner, like you practice? What kind of habits, routines do you think are important for you for your success? What books do you read? What podcasts do you listen to? How do you change your approach to your life in order to be successful?
So I will say that there is often a disparity between ideal and reality. So for me right now, it has been a very chaotic season in life. So I am not doing all the things that I ideally would like to be doing. I am optimistic that 25 will be a little bit easier. But I will say that there are certain anchors in my day that I really try to hold on to, and certain anchors that I realize that I haven't held on to and really need them back to really preserve my sanity. So in my practice, I do a lot. I play with words, mind, body, smile, and or soul, and really focusing on those components with my patients. And so the same for me. So beginning the day, I get up before everyone else. That's my favorite time of the day because it's quiet. There's no one to talk to. And I practice transcendental meditation, which is TM. I have fallen off it's typically twice a day for 20 minutes practice. And I do once a day for 20 minutes because that's just where we are right now. So I will meditate for 20 minutes, just spend some time just breathing. Usually have some water and make a cup of coffee. Though I'm sort of on the outs with coffee right now. But I think the ritual of just having something warm in my hands is always great in the morning. Exercising in the morning seems to be best for me. I just haven't had the bandwidth to do as much as I want to. Sometimes I'll get a walk in with some other ladies in my neighborhood, but just having that morning movement definitely creates energy and momentum for the rest of the day. And then as I go in through the day, I'm in the office by about 8:30, Monday through Thursday, and we see patients until about 4:30. And then of late, my time from that point to about bedtime is with the family. And then after bedtime, I'm catching up on some work and different things. But in an ideal world, on top of the meditation and movement, which really helps with just that mindset, mind-body part of it. I love having a routine yoga practice. I belong to a place called Evolve, which is a biohacking space where you can do hot and cold plunge, saunas. You can use the Brain Tap app, like all sorts of amazing stuff that is just super restorative and surrounded by a community of other people who are trying to do the same thing, which I think is really important, is to have those people in your life that you want to be around, that you want to be with, be like, and aspire to, improve yourself. On the weekends, I think family time is super important. I'm a foodie, but I do believe that eating a whole foods-based diet is really great, to eat the rainbow and to model that for my kids is also super important. What am I missing here? Something really important, I'm sure.
That's great. Yeah, that seems like a very structured time you have, and I think it's working great for you.
And books and podcasts. That's what I missed.
Awesome.
Yeah, I do. I love reading. I have a whole library of books in the practice that I'd say I'm about halfway through, maybe. Sometimes more, sometimes less. I try to blend like a educational book with a fun book. And so educational, I'm very fascinated with energy medicine right now, and just energy flow through the body, because I think it's something that we just don't know or think enough about that really has a huge impact on our overall well-being. And so working with a practitioner who does that, I have an acupuncturist who's amazing. I have another doctor that I'm doing some energy work with, has, I think, really impacted mind, lifestyle, just even things happening in my life, which is super cool.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. It's so hard to, I mean, a lot of it sounds kind of crazy in a conventional line of thinking, but the more I talk to people, the more I know that others are also.
A lot of new things sound kind of crazy until they become the mainstream, right? And that's the beauty of change. That's the beauty of discovery, you know. But let's switch to the financial aspect a little bit, because most of the medical practitioners are either, at the age of retirement, they burn out or they don't want to practice anymore. What do you think about the passive income streams that someone has to have in order to be financially independent? And do you have any strategy on that? Do you like any kind of investments? Do you prefer anything in your particular situation?
Good question. I honestly leave most of that to my husband and financial planner. It just isn't something that I've ever been super duper interested in, but I agree that it's absolutely critical to, especially running your own business, to have this other aspect going, because I mean, there are months where you're not profitable. You're not as productive as you expect. You have larger costs, and to live with that is much more stressful when this is the only source of income. I think there are some other interesting ways as a medical provider to have some more passive income streams that I think are really interesting, especially in this realm where you're trying to, in the brick and mortar practice that I exist in, like I can only see so many patients, and we have a lot of patients who travel from out of state and around the state to come see us, but there are many who would love this kind of care, but they can't get it. And so figuring out ways that we can provide, if not the care itself, but the education, and allow people to have ways they can maybe begin their journey without coming in to see us, I think is an opportunity to potentially increase income stream. But again, provide a service that's really needed. So I think with the age of information technology that we have, the ability to do that and to scale and reach, one to many is tremendous. I think having certain products and protocols, a lot of us will use a service like FullScript that, again, allows people to gain access to some of the products that we recommend. And there are financial benefits that come with that, depending on how you set your pricing. And I think, again, it has to be fair. This is not a profit center, but some of these little things can add up to more, just depending on, who it reaches and how. And I know personally, if I have a trusted source that I respect and I trust, and they recommend something and they are opening my eyes to this new product, like, yes, I'm going to support you. I'm going to buy this product, and hopefully it supports me too.
Knowing what you know right now, what kind of advice would you give to yourself years back?
I would say stick with your convictions. Stick with your beliefs. Don't change yourself because someone doesn't think that you fit the mold that they want you to fit. So if you don't fit that mold, learn what you can, because every experience has something that you can take from it. There's a purpose to it. It may not be the obvious, but there's a purpose, and it's helping you pave the way to where you're going to go. I think in some ways, I wish I'd stayed put a little bit more, just because it allows you to create a base of patients. I think every time I've moved, I've had to restart. But on the flip side, learning to restart means that you learn how to restart, you learn how to reconnect, you learn how to create those relationships and that trust faster. and more effectively. So perhaps no Thor's thing. I think mostly validation. I really don't believe in having a lot of regrets because I think there's a purpose to whatever happens. And so I think validation for someone else in my shoes, especially as a woman, is take the time off to have your children, take the time off to take care of your family. And the beauty of having my own business, and that was really the aspiration, was because I could take time off where I needed to have my life. And I can close the practice for 2 weeks over Christmas so we can do nothing if we want to. I can do these things. And as a woman, especially, I feel like we often tend to focus less on the bottom line because a lot of the value in what we do is in being able to care for others or receive care for ourselves. I don't know if that makes sense. But because of that, I'm more inclined to say it's okay to lose money in the business if it means that I can feed my family in other ways than just monetarily. So if we can spend time together and create those memories, that's a big deal. And I think that's something that I didn't really realize as much early on that would be so important. And especially as I look around and see other doctors like me who have these super fast moving practices and they don't take the time. They can't take the time off. They're, have a baby, back to work the next week, that kind of stuff. And I think that's so detrimental. I do believe that taking time off, taking time to learn, spend time with family, whatever it is that you're doing really ultimately pays back in spades when you come back into the practice and you're full and your heart is full. And I think really being aware of that has made me a better practitioner.
Great wisdom. Thank you for being with us, and I hope the audience will learn a lot from your insights.
Thank you. This was fun.
Appreciate your time.
Likewise.
That's a wrap on Stellar Success, Leveling Up for Medical Pros with Dr. Tudor Francu. Interested in joining us? Go to stellarsuccesspodcast.com/guest to apply. Stay stellar and level up.